women can live on their own now because we can, like, from our bone marrow, we can generate the same, like, genes that are needed for, like, sperm. And so, like, we have the eggs and the sperm now, and so y'all are obsolete.
On that note, I was actually reading an interesting manga called Ouku. I don't remember who is the mangaka of that, but basically the story is in feudal Japan, all of the men start dying out because of this disease that only affects the men. But because of that, all of the gender roles are reversed. And so it's feudal Japan, and the shoguns are female.
Okay.
And it's a really, really, like, the samurai are female, and men are considered not, you know, they're like a commodity. So, like, you're trading your son for some sort of riches. You're hoping that your son gets married into a rich family, and it's interesting to see these roles reversed.
That's really cool.
Yeah, because the only way for you to have a child is if you have sex with a man.
Yeah.
You get inseminated by a man, and so there's a character in the first few.
Oh, but I kind of don't like that because then that means that the male, like, there's more of a need for them.
Mm-hmm. And it's just that interesting, but it's an interesting dynamic shift. And
we don't need men. But no, I get.
It comes down to the like, there's a character in the beginning of the story that is basically, like, sort of prostituting himself for women who just wish to have a child.
Oh, okay.
Not for women who just want to have sex, but for those who wish to have a child. And he's like, I'm going to give you a child because it's like something he says in the manga. He's like, it's just something so pure. How can you not allow this person to have this, you know? So I thought it's an interesting read. It's super duper long, and I've only read
I'm
the
sure
first
it's
2
interesting.
volumes.
I'm just trying to think of, like, because I haven't read it. I'm just thinking of the natural implications of that. I don't like the fact that men become such, like, a hot commodity where you're searching, like, you need a man, because I feel like that's what's already, like, in society today is, like, men are like these. I mean, in traditional gender roles, men are, like, the dominant ones, and it's like it's always been that the woman needs the male.
And the males end up, you know, when I said the gender roles are reversed, even that in itself is reversed, where women are the dominant power in making the decisions in the family household, and the you know, the mainstay, the ouku, is this sort of, not brothel, but is the place where the concubines of the shogun live, right? But the concubines are all male, and so they're all men. I don't know. It's an interesting read. And
it's interesting, and like I said, so that's my only, like, gripe with it, and I have to read it obviously to see how that's, like, fulfilled and if it actually plays out the way that I'm thinking it would play out. But I also like the fact that not only does it seem like they're more, like, needed and, like, oh, you have to have them to have a child, but it also, like, almost objectifies them.
It does,
which I really like.
Yeah, and that's sort of part of the story, is that, like, the more fair men are the ones that make it into the ouku, and it's supposed to have, like, 100,000 men for just the shogun to have. And there's this interesting part in it as well when the first night that a new shogun is chosen, or, you know, is crowned, I don't know what you would call it, she has to go and choose a concubine to sleep with, right? And so she chooses this main character, and he doesn't have a choice. He has to sleep with her because that's tradition, right? And the Japanese is very much tradition, especially feudal Japan. And so he has to sleep with her, but because he has, quote, defiled the new shogun, he has to be put to death because he has defiled her body. And so there's the interesting dilemma in that as well for the main character. Cool. So really interesting read. Ouku, I don't know the mangaka, but it's spelled Ooku, I believe. So, and the O's got, like, a line over it.
It's one of those cool O's.
Yeah, one of those cool O's. But yeah, so this is, if you don't know by now, this is Media for the Intellectually Impoverished. I'm Taylor.
I'm Randy.
And together...
This is the podcast where we enrich your mediocre lives.
So this week we're talking about superheroes.
Woohoo!
Really excited. Randy's so excited.
I love superheroes.
She had some stuff to talk about with this in a previous episode, and we didn't let her because I said let's make an entire episode about it. So here we are, like 7 weeks later.
I know usually we do it right after, but this one we waited. We bided our time.
Yeah, we had to to really let it ruminate until we finally got it.
Everybody's just wondering out there, when's the superhero episode coming?
Dude, when's it coming?
I've been waiting.
I've been waiting for you guys. It's been like 3 weeks. For us, it's
been months.
It's been so long. So I'm so excited for this episode. Because I love comic books and I love superheroes. Who started last week? Was it me or you? I think it was me.
You started last week.
Do you want to start this week?
Yeah. I wanted to discuss comics, but I didn't get much done in my way of research.
Discuss them comics. Discuss what you got.
I mean, I don't have anything. I just kind of wanted to talk about like the history of comic books. I didn't have a specific one that I wanted to talk about because as much as I love them, I haven't really sat down and read one from start to finish. I've read some of, not superhero ones, but other like less common ones, like cartoony ones. I know that there's a Steven Universe comic book that I've been obsessed with, and I constantly go to comic book stores trying to find them all. Currently only have like 8 out of 78.
Only 78?
I love Steven Universe, though.
No,
but that's not the topic of today.
Well, yeah, I mean, kind of. He's kind of the superhero.
He is. I mean, they're all... Okay, you're right. He is a superhero because he does have powers.
Yeah.
Over... Because he does take place in a society where there are just regular humans. Humans. He's Homo sapiens. Going off of topic just real quick. I was watching Mastermind or some kind of like old old game show, and it was talking about like what was the first like scientific name for the man that we know today or something. And I was like, what do you mean the first name or scientific name? And then the person was like, Homo sapiens. And I was like, oh, you mean like what we are? Like, I don't know. It was just so funny. Like, I completely forgot for a moment that we're not like technically I mean, we are humans, but our technical name is Homo sapiens. I just thought it was strange. Anyways, you're right. Steven Universe is a kind of superhero because if you don't know the story, I'm going to go talk about this for a little bit.
All right. Let's go. First tangent.
I mean, because you're right. He is kind of a superhero. So if you don't know the story, there's these gems, and they're from another planet out in outer space, and their main leader is Rose Quartz, and she comes to Earth back when Earth is at its very beginnings, and there's like cave people and things like this, so they're very first starting to form societies. She falls in love with the human race, and so her society is supposed to conquer worlds and take them over so that their kind can take over that planet and get all the resources out of it. But she falls in love with the human race and decides to save it. So by doing that, she is excommunicated from her planet, and she takes with her some rebels. And so those rebels are Garnet, Pearl, and Amethyst. And then from that, you get Steven Universe. He's the child of Rose Quartz, and he's learning how to take on her powers and take on the responsibilities and the problems that she caused during her life. Because as much as it sounds like she's a good person as you watch the show, she wasn't the best. She caused a lot of problems and left Steven with a lot of trauma. Have you watched the show?
I have not finished it.
Okay, then I can't spoil it, which is really sad. But it's a really good show, and I really like how it's an adult. Like, kids can watch it, but there's a lot of adult themes that come with it, especially in the last season of it. They kind of branched off from Steven Universe, came out with a new show that has one season called Steven Universe Future. Takes place 2 years into the future.
Really?
You didn't know about
I
this?
didn't know about that.
So so it finished Steven Universe, then a movie came out called Steven Universe the Musical, which is 2 years into the future, and it shows like what happens in that small time. And then after that, Steven Universe Future comes out, and again, that's 2 years after the original storyline, and it's showing how he's progressing since finally defeating this final boss in the first show. And I love how in this last season, it really goes through all of like the trauma that he's been through and all of these problems that he had to solve and these people that he had to fight and how it really affected him. But anyways, going back to him being a superhero, so they do have these powers. They are technically gems. So his mom was Rose Quartz. So when he's born, he's half human, half gem. And so he gets these powers where he can like form a shield or form a sword and fight these other aliens that are coming to the planet. or corrupted gems, as they call them. And he has his friends who are also like his surrogate mothers, Pearl, Amethyst, and Garnet, who help fight along with him. And so it's the story of him maturing and going through the natural progresses, because when it starts he's 14, and so you're right in the prime of like puberty and everything's changing, and you're like, and I have to save the world. It's great.
No, I loved I when it first came out, I was so obsessed with it. I was sat down every week and I watched the episode as it aired. And then as it went on and it became more serialized and less episodic, episodic. Meaning the difference being an episodic show has a story arc for each episode. Every episode has a 3-act beginning, and then it's got a climax, like it builds up to this climax, and then it's got a short denouement or ending or resolution. And so every single episode had that 3-act structure, and I really, really enjoyed that, especially as a younger teenager at the time. And then as the show continued and I matured along with it, and I saw it become more serialized, as well as Cartoon Network doing a poor job of distributing the show itself, doing large gaps between airings of the show before releasing a butt ton of episodes in 1 week.
Yeah, and it's really difficult because at some points they tried to shut down the show because, like I said, there was very adult themes, I want to say, but they're not really adult themes. Hopefully, as society keeps maturing, our younger kids keep maturing, because in the show, all of the characters are technically female. And so, but you see relationships form between them, and so Cartoon Network was like, no lesbians. This is a kid's show. And then I feel like that's where a lot of the breaks came in, because they're like, well, if you don't change what you're doing, we're just not going to air your show. So. Yeah,
and so as I watched the show and it became more serialized and those gaps became more prominent, I sort of fell off the bandwagon at one point, because then I had found other shows and other passions and other things I was doing at the time. And so I feel like I really... by the time everything sort of got resolved and they started pumping out those episodes in a reasonable manner, I had already fallen off the wagon, and so I'd lost that chance to really sit down and finish it in the way it was intended. And so it's one of those shows that I've been meaning to go back and just watch, but I don't know where to find it.
Hulu. All on Hulu.
Great. I don't have Hulu.
I will give you my account.
Perfect.
Please watch it. So
can you can you spell out the
Nope.
name and the password for the account real quick?
Because someone out there will actually, I wouldn't have a problem with that. Honestly, I wouldn't, because I feel like those Netflix and Hulu, they cost too much money. Netflix is raising their prices again. It's in December. It's going to be $13.99 for a Netflix subscription, when it started out as like $7.99, and that just grinds my gears. I hate it.
Yeah.
But I honestly would give it out to everybody. If everybody could promise me you wouldn't change the password so that I don't have access to it anymore. Honestly, I'd let you all watch it, because I feel like, why should you all have to pay for it? Stop giving them money.
Yeah, and also, like, being us, we're avid promoters of all types of media.
Exactly. Just go watch stuff. Just go read stuff. Go play stuff.
Go read, watch, and play things of substance, let us say. Not everything out there is full of substance, and I think that's something that the superhero genre definitely is a part of. Because there's a lot of other than even comic book media of just shit. It's just really bad stuff, and it's not well produced, and there's not like a passion behind it. It's not made by someone who really understands the background material and where it came from. And so without that, there's no foundation for the story to take hold of. And if you don't understand your audience, then you're not going to pander towards them, then you're not going to do well, and it's not going to be a good movie.
Exactly. So I originally had everything written down to talk about the new Batman movie that's coming out, and I will get to that. But that was back when I think all of this information came from, we were talking about blockbusters, because exactly what you're saying. A lot of people, because they know it's a hot commodity. The superheroes back in, I want to say maybe the 70s or 80s, even maybe 90s, it was really nerdy for people to read comic books, to talk about superheroes, even maybe in the early 2000s, but I feel like by then it was starting to get a better grip on its audience. But yeah, so that's it's really popular, or that's a common thing when it comes to superhero movies, and even in comic books or other forms of media, like I'm sure you'll talk about in video games. Not all superhero media is good because people know today that it will make money. It's a popular thing now, it's a hot commodity. And so some people will just make a film, make a video game without doing their background research from the source materials, which is comic books, what makes the character who they really are at their core. And they'll just take the very surface level information about them and then go and try and make a movie about it. And it doesn't turn out good.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of that? Because I do.
Oh, what are you going to say? Because I think we're talking about the same thing.
I'm talking about the original Daredevil.
Oh, okay.
And then Spider-Man 3.
Okay.
And Howard the Duck.
One of those people.
One of those people? What do you mean?
I don't know. I feel like there's very specific people out there who not only know about Howard the Duck, but we'll talk about him.
Well, Howard the Duck is a duck named Howard that can talk.
No way.
Hold up. He's a womanizer and an alcoholic. And he has a rocket launcher. And that's about all of his personality summed up into 3 sentences. He's pseudo-popular. For some reason, they made a movie about him with a weird live-action puppet duck and a romantic interest. And it didn't go well. That's all I'll say about Howard the Duck.
Okay. Was it? Never mind.
Was it what?
Wasn't he in? Didn't he make like a small cameo?
Yes, he did. He made a cameo in Guardians of the Galaxy 1, as well as, I believe, Avengers Endgame, but I'm not quite sure.
That's what I was thinking of. For a brief 10 frames.
Yeah, when they had, I think it was when they were all lined up, they had Howard the Duck there.
Yeah.
Which was, a nice little nod to Howard the Duck, but the original movie, not so great. But yeah.
I was specifically going to talk about Batman versus Superman.
Oh, Batman v Superman. Not great.
Not great.
But you talk about it.
I was just going to say that's one example of not really, I'm not discrediting them or anything. I'm sure the people who wrote the film and produced it, they did their research, but in trying to make something different and trying to make something that had not been seen before and try and get more of an audience, they hurt the character. So Batman, if many of you don't know, I'm sure everybody at this point has heard about Batman, but he's a vigilante who, his parents died if you don't know, I'm going to tell his backstory, but if you don't know, this is the first thing you learn in any Batman movie, is his parents are killed walking outside of a theater, and then then he becomes this vigilante, and he has, Bruce Wayne has all of this money, and he learns to fight, and he goes out and he stops crimes. His main thing
honestly, that sounds a little bit like a fan fiction.
It does, honestly, right? But he goes out and stops people, but he doesn't kill them. Like that's because his parents died when he was so young. I feel like that's a big thing for him. That's what he values so much. He'd rather capture somebody and make sure that they spent the proper, through the justice system and things like that. He's very just. Doesn't kill them. Batman v Superman, he knocks all that out.
Doesn't he just get a gun at one point?
Yeah. And he just seems a ruthless killer is how I saw one article put it. I just hate that. That's one of his core values, and how can you get that wrong? I get that for some movies you need to push the boundaries a bit, and I will talk about that. Like I said, there's a new Batman movie coming out that will push boundaries, but I think it will be better than Batman v Superman because it will push boundaries in the right way.
In the correct direction.
So you have Batman is a ruthless killer. You have Superman, who is this superhuman. He's a Superman. He comes from a different planet. I forget what it's called. Krypton. And he goes around and he saves people. He stops trains from hitting ladies and things like this. Right? That's what happens in Marvel.
He's the ideal American superhero.
Exactly.
Is how I would describe him. He is perfect hair, perfect chin.
And so that's the thing about him, being a true American, perfect citizen, things like that. So he's supposed to inspire hope. Right? You would agree?
I would agree.
So, but in Batman v Superman, I feel like we get the exact opposite. Throughout the entire movie, he inspires fear.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen the movie, but I would agree, especially with the opening scene. Well, the point of Batman v Superman, if you can't tell, is Batman and Superman fight.
Yeah.
So that's the whole movie builds up to that sort of moment.
And that's the other thing that I don't like about it. Going a bit off of character development and how they're not true to their original characters, but the movie itself, it spends... How long's that movie? 2.5 hours? It spends 2 hours of this building tension between these two forces. It spends a lot of time of them explaining why Batman is angry at Superman and wants to beat him up and all of these things. Superman doesn't have much of a reason for hating Batman, except that in the movie, I think it's Lex Luthor tells him that, oh, if you don't kill Batman, I'm gonna like hurt your mom or something like that, I think is the storyline. So he doesn't have a great reason. I mean, saving your mom, yeah, but they spend all of this time on Batman and his reason why Superman needs to go away. Did I say that right? Batman and Superman. And then, so anyways, 2 hours of build-up, and then a 10-minute fight?
Fight's not even that good.
Not even that good.
Nope, not that great. To me, what happened to me is I think they bit off a little bit more than they wanted to chew at the time, because they were trying to catch up with all of the Avengers. And the Marvel movies, and like we said a long time ago, those movies set the bar.
They set the bar really high.
Yeah, because especially the original Avengers movie set the bar really high because it was a good movie. It grossed well and it was well received for the most part. You know, I don't remember there being a lot of backlash for it, but they tried to reach that bar, and in doing so, they sort of fell very far short of the bar that was set, because they attempted to meet them like where they were within like 2 movies.
Yeah.
Because there was this one, and there was Superman, there was Batman v Superman, and then there was Justice League. And then after that, they put out Aquaman and Wonder Woman and stuff. And
like those really, they keep going down. I don't mean to harp on them, but Batman v Superman, I feel like after that just kind of goes down. Wonder Woman, I'll take. Wonder Woman I thought was great.
Okay. It was. I wasn't in love with it, but you know, it was a good movie. I think that, like, you know, there was so much setup for the Avengers.
Yeah.
There was the Iron Man movies. There was the Captain America movies. There was a Hulk movie. There was so much setup and build up. And what they did is they sprinkled these tiny little tidbits, you know, with post-credits scenes. That was where post-credits became popular, was because of the Avengers movie. And they sprinkled these little like tidbits of like, ooh, maybe we'll finally see them all together, or, you know, Nick Fury showing up in the end, or Iron Man showing up in the end of the Hulk movie or something. And after sprinkling all that stuff, they finally brought it all together with the Avengers, and it was this like decade long, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And it finally happened. We're so excited to see it. And then when Superman came out, was in 2013, right? 2013-ish. And then Batman v Superman came out in 2015. And it was already attempting to bring all the characters together immediately, even after the original Superman had no Batman in it at all. Nothing. And it was sad when it finally came together, because what they wanted to do was get the whole Justice League arc. When I didn't watch the Justice League, but I know that in Batman v Superman they hinted at Darkseid and all of the that character and his arc. But you know, I feel like it wanted to meet the standards of Marvel as the other comic book aficionado. You know, there's Marvel and DC; those are the 2 big boys. And they didn't do it.
It tried too much in one movie, like you're saying. And last episode, I think it was last episode when I was talking about character development and how it's great when you can see all of the thought that's been put into it by the writers and the producers and the crew. Especially over a TV show, like I was saying, over so much time, you can really see the planning, and that's what I love, and I love seeing those hints at the end, seeing those at the very beginning of the show. Same thing goes for the Marvel Universe, like you were saying, with all of the end credit scenes, always hinting at what the future held, and then finally doing that justice, actually having them come together and it just not being left in the dust. It's so good when there's just planning involved. That's all I can say, is when you really think these things out, when you don't just take them as they come. granted, some people can do it. Some people can have something thrown at them and make something great out of it and make it connect with previous things or make it connect with future things. Don't get me wrong. But I think it's really good when writers plan all of that out in the beginning. And it really shows. And I just love the interconnected of it, because then you can go back and be like, oh yeah, that's when they mentioned this and that's what it paid off here.
And one thing that the Marvel Studios does really well is they plan in phases.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear like phase 1 Marvel was the initial like Captain America and all that stuff. Phase 2 Marvel was like the Avengers. Phase 3 was like Age of Ultron on, and then phase 4 was the Endgame series.
Mm-hmm.
And then now they're moving on to what, phase 5 Marvel or something, and that's post Endgame, how they deal with that.
I have no idea how that's gonna go, and I'm so excited.
No one has any idea because they've been holding on to those movies for so long.
I'm so excited though.
But I'm excited for the new Spider-Man, which could possibly be all three
of them, right?
Spider-Man all in one. I know I'm holding out hopes that are likely going to be unfulfilled. I do not want to get too hopeful, and I don't want to put anyone's hopes up too high. But good golly, Miss Molly, if they did that, I would probably pee my pants.
Yeah, I can't wait for that either. My boyfriend was telling me about it, and I was reading articles. I'm like, this is never gonna happen. This is just people getting their hopes up, and it really looks like it's gonna happen now. I'm so excited.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all know I love Tobey Maguire.
I also love Tobey Maguire.
Can I just say, I think he's the best Spider-Man.
I disagree with that.
Really?
Yeah, I do, because...
I don't diss Tom Holland. Tom Holland's freaking hot as hell.
No, and I don't think it's even a hotness factor. I think that it's just the way that they were portrayed. And part of that is the writing, so it's not all necessarily
You also have to think
fault.
of the context of the time that they were, because the Tom Holland Spider-Man is very modern and fits the type of society that we're living in now.
Yeah, but in this, I guess the same with Tobey Maguire's. I think that most people can agree that Andrew Garfield is the least Peter Parker-y out of all of them, because he's just too cool.
He is.
Yeah, he like rides a skateboard and stuff, and like that's not the crux of Peter Parker is that he's a nerd.
Again, another example of what I was talking about. I mean, again, they could have done all of their research, but still missing the superhero at their core being of what they truly are.
Yeah. It's just Tobey Maguire was they got a lot of the base comic stuff together of college Peter Parker, right? College Peter Parker works for the Daily Bugle, takes photography, does photos of Spider-Man, and that's how he makes his money. Is he takes photos of himself solving crimes. Saving people.
Solving crimes.
Stopping crimes. And then...
He's a detective.
He's a detective spider cop.
Detective Spidey.
And then Teenage, the original, like, first time Peter Parker ever became Spider-Man was when he was in high school, and I think that Tom Holland's Spider-Man does a really good job of portraying that side of the Peter Parker, of the really nerdy in chess club, doing... science clubs, and all of that side of Spider-Man. So I think each has their own merits. It's just, whatever time it happens. And I think Spider-Man 2, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 2, or Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 with starring Tobey Maguire, is probably the best out of those three in portraying Spider-Man, especially not Spider-Man 3.
Can you run that down by me?
Okay.
For what the second one's about?
The second one is college-age Peter Parker, broken up with Mary Jane, meets Dr. Octavius, works with Dr. Octavius in creating this machine that can like use nuclear fusion to make a little mini sun. And in the process, Dr. Octavius becomes Doc Ock, and Spider-Man has to come to terms with the fact that Mary Jane doesn't love him anymore, and that his mentor is now a supervillain. Yeah.
Good one.
Good one. I think that's the one where the car comes through the window and he punches it.
Oh, nice, yeah.
It's great.
They're all... Tobey Maguire ones are good. Did you diss the third one? I thought the third one...
Have you seen Spider-Man 3?
Yeah.
Have you seen the scene where Tobey Maguire dances?
That's the best part.
No, I think that it's just not the best.
It's not the best, but it's what made my heart soar the most. Because isn't that one full of love? No?
That one is the one with Venom.
Yeah, it is with the one with Venom.
And Eddie Brock, I think but Eddie Brock is another photographer instead of.
That is not Eddie Brock.
It's not Eddie Brock?
No.
Who is it? Who is it that Venom gets? It's not Eddie Brock. It's got to be. I'm pretty sure it's Eddie Brock.
Oh, you're talking about the character's name.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about the actor.
No, I'm talking about the character.
Yeah, sorry.
Character's name is Eddie Brock.
You're right.
I am right.
Never mind.
Who knows everything?
I thought you were talking about the actor because you referenced
Tobey Maguire?
Tobey Maguire, and I was like, the actor's name is not
Eddie Brock?
Yeah.
Eddie Brock is the character in the comics
you're right,
that Venom does, but Eddie Brock originally is supposed to... I don't remember. It's been a while since I've read the comics, but I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be... Well, because the Venom originally gets Flash Thompson, which is his high school arch enemy, right? Mm-hmm. And then eventually moves on to Eddie Brock. So, whatever. Potato. Topato. Anyway, do you want me to chime in with some stuff?
Yeah, just really quickly, I want to finish what we were talking about, Batman v Superman. So you're right in the fact that they tried to, that was another gripe that I had, they tried to do too much in one film and tried to catch up with Marvel. I think they would have done a much better job if they, again, had planned it out. I know maybe they didn't want to do that because they didn't want to seem too much like Marvel, but again, that payoff would have been really, it might have taken a while, but I think it would have paid off. And I'm predicting a change, a fluctuation when it comes to Marvel. I'm excited to see what the new phase has, like I've said before, but I'm also a bit hesitant because I don't know where they can go from here. So I'm just kind of one of my predictions is Marvel might fall a bit, might falter at some points with some movies, just because I don't like it when movies, they dig themselves a hole, and I feel like they've kind of dug themselves a hole now.
Yeah, you could say that. There's definitely, an Endgame set the bar so high. And they did a great job with that movie and all of the build up towards that movie and then the payoff with that movie, and it's amazing. But I think the next place that they're going, one of the movies scheduled is Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. Yeah. So the multiverse being, for those of you who don't know, the multiverse is this idea of parallel dimensions all containing different versions of the same superheroes. So where we see, the Miles Morales, have you seen Into the Spider-Verse? That's the same idea, and that comes from the comics. In the comics, the multiverse exists. And I think that they're going to probably delve into this multiverse idea for a little bit and then see where that gets them in. But among that, there is that challenge of, continuing to keep that bar high forever. Because, like we said, when you set the bar, you got to meet it. You have to meet it, or you have to get higher, or everyone's going to think your stuff is trash. Mm-hmm. And not because it is trash necessarily, but because it's not as good as...
Because you set the bar high.
Yeah, because you set the bar so high. And so they're going to have difficulty maintaining that height or that standard. So
my point just being, I'm predicting, I obviously could be extremely wrong. I'm just thinking that coming in the next couple of years that Marvel's going to falter a bit, maybe not fail, completely become trash, everyone's going to hate them, but it will falter is what I'm predicting. So this is the time I think DC and Warner Brothers needs to step up their game and start coming to the forefront. And how they're going to do that is they need to do what Marvel did. It's going to take some time, but this is the time to do it. When you're not directly competing with Marvel, when Marvel starts to falter and people are like, oh, we need to find something else to interest us now. DC can do it. And so that's doing one-offs with specific superheroes, with Batman, with Superman, Wonder Woman, all of them building to a greater story. I think this is the time to do it. And that's just what I'm saying. And I think they're going to do it, coming with movies that they're going to come out with soon.
Yeah. I'm excited. I think that what you're saying is possible because, and this isn't all, necessarily together, but the Joker, directed by Todd Phillips, starring Joaquin Phoenix, is, I think it was the first step in the correct direction where it was a focus on
100%.
It was a focus on filmmaking before, necessarily the comic booky part of it. And I think that if DC does that kind of thing, where Marvel focuses heavily on the comic books and all that stuff, and all the lore and connecting everything in together, I think that if DC might take this more, let's focus on the filmmaking first and foremost, and making a good film first before making a good comic book film.
Couldn't agree with you more. I think that's another example of what I was talking about in a previous episode, where you can't just copy and paste from a different media. And I feel like Marvel does that good. Obviously, they're doing incredible. That's their style. That's their niche, taking directly from the comics. I think the way that DC will beat them is to make it more of a film, like you're saying, a film first. Make the media what it is. Don't make the movie try to seem like a comic book. Make a movie first, and the story will come with it.
Yeah. I just want to talk about it because I remembered it. Have you seen the movie Watchmen?
Mm-mm.
Have you read the graphic novel Watchmen?
No, everybody, you're the third person to tell me.
I'm probably the third person to tell you. I'm probably two of the three people to tell you.
Alex, my friend, now you.
Oh, I'm not your friend?
I didn't want to say her name. I said it in a previous episode.
That's fine. But no, so the Watchmen, or just Watchmen, is a graphic novel who, I don't remember the author. I should look it up. So it's by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. It is a story of, in the future, after superheroes have kind of been almost outlawed, I believe. There's a group of 6 or so heroes that had disbanded, named the Watchmen. And as this new, sort of problem arises, I don't remember the specifics, but a new problem arises due to one of the Watchmen being killed. Then they go on this huge final sort of bash, and a bunch of stuff happens, and then it ends. And it's, at its core, it's an amazing graphic novel, and it's not all about being a superhero and the glory of being a superhero. It's more about the nitty gritty, what it's like to live life in this limelight, what it does to a person, and what these powers how these powers or these ideas can affect you as a person, and it does a great job of highlighting that through the story. It is not a happy story by any means. In fact, it's quite dark. But the movie, there's like 3 versions of it out there. The theater released version, about an hour and a half, typical movie length. The uncut version is almost shot for shot exactly what the graphic novel was.
That's cool.
Right? And then the super uncut version, the director's uncut version.
Oh, the raw footage.
Now, what it is in the graphic novel, there is a graphic novel. So a character, one of the parts of the story is this character suffering on the open seas, and similar to that story of the man and the albatross, shoots the albatross, and then all of this bad stuff happens to his ship because it's bad luck to kill an albatross. Mm-hmm. So it's similar to that, and he's drifting alone at sea after all this, after a great storm, and it's his story of returning to society. In the original cuts, they mention that, but they don't ever go into detail. But in the super uncut version, there is an entirely animated film on top of that for the graphic novel. So it's like that film plus the graphic novel plus the rest of the film, and it is quite a romp. Yeah, no, I would suggest reading the graphic novel. I wouldn't necessarily watch the movie first. While it is a very, very good comic book movie, mm-hmm. I don't think it's the best movie.
Yeah.
And I think you as a cinephile would look at it and be like, this sucks.
Just a copy and paste of the comic
It's
book.
very much a copy and paste, but there's also this other side of watching a comic book movie where if you go in expecting a grandiose movie, a perfect film, an award-winning film, you're likely not going to walk out very satisfied. But if you walk in with this idea of, I'm going in to watch a movie based on a comic book, you're going to walk out feeling pretty fulfilled for the most part. Mm-hmm. And it also depends on the movie, but that is very much a good comic book movie, a movie for comic book fans. And I really enjoyed the graphic novel. I really enjoyed I watched the uncut version, but not the super duper uncut version, with one of my friends. We watched it late at night. He brought it over. It was a good time. But I actually want to talk about some video games now. We were talking about, right? My thing. The thing I'm here for.
Yeah.
We were talking a lot about Batman and his core values and how you need to focus on those core values in a movie if you want to make the movie believable or a good movie.
Or get a homage to the comic books.
Yeah, you say homage?
Homage.
I've always said homage.
I thought it's homage.
I don't know. I'm not sure. It's probably both.
Okay.
English language is very fluctuative. So the Arkham series, the Arkham video game series, is the pinnacle. Was probably one of the first good superhero video games of the modern era. So it started out with Arkham City. Was a project made by Rocksteady Studios, and the reason that I feel like it does so well is because it is very well rooted in the nostalgia of the comic books. It is an original story. It is heavily influenced by Grant Morrison's Arkham Asylum, a serious house on Serious Earth. But it is still an original story written specifically for this game. One of the things they did is they went and got a writer for one of the old Batman novels. When they asked him his process, they said, "Hey, how do you go about writing a new story about Batman?" And they asked him about it. And when he came back to them, they had pretty much been on the same page. And so he then joined the team, and they co-wrote together the story. I'm not sure the name of that writer. I should have written it down, but I didn't because I'm an idiot. But
agreed.
One of the things they talk about is when they were making the game, they had to decide what to use from the source material and what to bring out. So, like you said, Batman, one of his core values is that he doesn't kill anyone. Of course, there are instances in the comics because there's so many Batman comics.
Of course, and it comes with wanting to change up the character. Nobody wants to just see the same thing over and over again. But I feel like when you're doing that, when you're pushing boundaries, you still need to have those core values. You can push those boundaries, and you can maybe have a story where he's so angry at somebody that he wants to kill him, and he starts having these thoughts, and maybe he almost does, and then afterwards he comes to terms with it, and he's like, no, I'm not that kind of person. I could see that. I could see you trying to change it up, but still keeping those core values intact.
But there are definitely many Batman comics that do include Batman killing someone for one reason or another, because there's just so many Batman comics out there, and there's so many writers of Batman, there's so many interpretations of Batman. And so when they were creating this Batman game, they really wanted to get the feel of the nostalgia of Batman. And so they chose this idea that you can't have Batman killing, like Batman doesn't kill. And so they made sure that was a very hard line that they chose not to pass. They said, no matter what happens, we're not killing anyone. And so they did, any workaround that they could. They knock people out. They make sure that there's like knockout. It looks like they're falling over, like sort of getting knocked out, thrown about. In Arkham City, you can't knock anyone off of a ledge, so it doesn't insinuate that you're killing them.
Nice.
Things like that are very hard pressed. Like this is what Batman is. And on top of that, they needed to capitalize on what Batman was and how could we have you play as Batman and interpret that into a playable sort of interactive piece. So they chose to do these Predator moments. So there's sort of the combat includes, hand-to-hand combat, because Batman's known for his martial arts.
Yeah.
So they focused a lot on making that feel like it flows very well. Like it's not difficult, right? It doesn't have a super high skill cap, but it does take some time to get used to the ins and outs. So you can play it just very simply, or you can play like moderately crazy. And as the series goes on, the skill cap becomes higher and higher. A skill cap being, say it's a game with a high skill cap means that they allow for players to become really, really particular about their play style and very, very particular about specifics. Like there's very crazy things you can do in the game that aren't necessarily part of the basics of the game. Good example of that being a fighting game, right? So if you're playing a fighting game like Street Fighter, the game plays relatively simple. You hold back to block, you can do a couple of special moves, and you can hit people with certain buttons. Like there's a light, heavy, and medium. But on top of that, there's a higher skill cap because you can combo people into different moves and all of that kind of stuff. And so Batman has a moderately high, the Arkham Asylum games, Arkham Asylum itself has a moderately high skill cap, whereas the games as a whole have a pretty high skill cap, which allow you to really take control and feel like you're Batman, like you're fighting 100 enemies to one person, and you feel like you have total control over the scenario, as Batman feels like he does when you're reading the comics. And in that same idea, one of Batman's staples is that moment where he's taking on gunmen, and he takes one out without the other people knowing, and then suddenly they realize he's gone, and this sort of these fear tactics that Batman is amazing at pulling through, and sort of popping up around corners and out of nowhere. And so they came up with these, they call them Predator encounters, where you are Batman, you're taking out armed men, and attempting to do that without any of them finding you or noticing you. And originally, Arkham Asylum does a really good job of capturing specifically what Batman does well. So you've got batarangs, you've got a bat claw, and you've got all these tools at your arsenal that you can use to take down enemies in a multitude of ways. And as the series progressed, there's 4 games in the series, and as it progresses, there's become increasingly more useful and different items that you can add to your skill set, until, and as the technology advanced, your characters, the enemies, would actually become more frightened. You can see like their heartbeat, you can see their condition, whether it's confused, scared, or terrified. And if characters will get scared enough, you can walk up on them and they won't do anything because they'll be so terrified of the Batman in front of them after seeing all of what happened.
Yeah.
And so they won't initially shoot you, and it gives you an opportunity to take them down. And I think that Rocksteady does a brilliant job of really making you feel like Batman in these moments, and really taking Batman down to its roots, and saying, how can we allow the player to feel like they're vanishing out of thin air, and that no one's seeing them do all these things, and you're taking on 40 gunmen and none of them have noticed you there, and how do we give the player that opportunity? And Rocksteady does an amazing job of allowing the player to feel in control of these situations enough that they're not, raging over it, and AI advances, and the AI becomes more aware of where Batman is at all times, or how Batman does things. And it's fun. It's fun. It's a fun game. I love all of them. I've played all of them through. I've 100% beat Asylum and City. And the rest of them I have yet to do that because they're so big.
They're so big.
Another one that I want to talk about, I'm just going to briefly touch on, is the Infamous series, which is not necessarily comic book related. So if you know the Infamous series, it's developed by Sucker Punch. And the idea that sparked it is, what if a regular human was given superpowers? How does that affect a human? How do the decisions you make as a human affect society? So the big thing with Infamous is you have a karma meter. So you can either be a hero, a good person, or you can be a villain, someone that uses your powers for yourself. And so a brief synopsis of the story would be, the original game Infamous would be Cole McGrath is in a sudden disaster that allows him to gain the power to manipulate electricity. And when a plague is struck in the same city that he lives in, and they're all quarantined inside each other, society begins to fall apart. And Cole McGrath is tasked with finding a FBI agent's husband in the midst of all of that. And, you're attempting to navigate around this world of people with superpowers that are popping up everywhere. And this game's core mechanic is how your decisions affect the world around you, and does tragedy follow someone with superpowers solely because they have these powers, or because of the decisions that they've made along the way. So the Sucker Punch does a good job of changing these decisions, or allowing you to make these decisions in game, from the most minuscule of things of punching a civilian on the sidewalk because they threw a rock at you can change your karma meter, versus saving a citizen who's dying on the sidewalk by using your electrical powers to restart their heart. And so it's not only do these decisions affect you as a character, like Cole McGrath as a character, and not even in the sense that you just gain different powers. So if you're evil, you get different powers than if you're good. but it also affects his physical appearance. If you're more evil, you become more gout, more sickly looking. If you're a good person, you seem to look more heroic. You're more fleshed out. You're more colored. But it also affects sort of the world around you and how the people around you treat you. Even down to some of their news broadcasts that are put across on TVs around, and they'll mention you and whether or not you're being good or evil or things along that line. And it's a really good example of something not comic book related that still really well captures a superhero aesthetic. In the game, you as a player are stumbling around the world in the same way that Cole McGrath is as he tries to stumble around unlocking these new powers.
Mm-hmm.
And so the game does a good job of really giving you as the player a sense of morality, like, thinking about how your decisions will affect someone, and knowing which one's good and which one's bad, and choosing to do them not just because you want to, but because of the game and the story and the characters that you've made these relationships with. And the game Sucker Punch does a great job of making that game really resonate, especially with me. I've loved the Infamous series I've played. There's 3 games in total, 4 games really if you count sort of a mini sequel. There's Infamous 1, Infamous 2, which are both in the Cole McGrath series. And then there is a sort of successor to that, Infamous Second Son and Infamous First Light, which are of the Delson Rowe series, who's the new main character after Cole McGrath.
Yeah, when you first said Infamous, I was thinking of Second Son, and then you started describing it, and I was like, that's not Second Son.
No.
There was video games before that.
Yeah, and I know.
Does the game does it question what morality actually is, I guess, and what makes something good and what makes something bad? I know that you were saying the broadcasts and newscasts will depict whether your character is being good or bad, but are there times where you think that you've done something good and then the news says that you're a bad person?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. In the beginning of the game, sort of the first big mission, you have to climb this tower to get this food supply drop down, because they're dropping, the government's dropping in food for the residents that are stuck in the quarantine. Mm-hmm. And so when they get stuck on this tower, and you're the only person that can survive a fall that far. So you climb up, you release the food for them. And then if you allow the people to take the food, so you have your first big moral decision is this food here, the amount of food could feed you and your girlfriend and your best friend for weeks, months even. Mm-hmm. Or you could let everyone that needs the food take some food. And so you have to either wait, let everyone take the food, or shoot some of the people and cause a panic. Shoot them with your electrical powers and cause a panic, and then they all run away and you get the food for yourself. And if you allow the people to take the food, no matter what decision you take, even if you take the good one and the people have just seen you give them food, on the news screen, one of the guys shows a photo of you saying that you're the, quote, terrorist that blew up the city. And then the people all immediately turn on you and begin throwing rocks and yelling at and cussing at you and all of that stuff. And so it does a good job of sort of posing this, well, I did something good for you and now you're hating me for it, and having to make this decision of, do I fight back to these people? Yeah. Because I can. Mm-hmm. Because it specifically waits a little while to give you the next mission, because in the beginning you only have the story missions, you don't have any side missions. And it waits a little bit until that moment happens to give you a chance to react to this moment specifically before moving on. And there are definitely moments in the game where you have to make tough decisions of morality, like choosing, like a loved one versus the many. So the one versus the many. And even in those choices, sometimes they turn them on your head. So say if you wanted to choose to save the loved one, maybe it was a trick and that this person isn't a loved one. It's just a random citizen, and your loved one is stuck with all the other people. And if you'd chosen to save the many, you would have saved your loved one as well. So it poses these questions of morality and how decisions affect you and stuff like that.
And I think that's what good superhero movies and comic books and all of that, that's like a big superhero trope, is that they bring in questions of morality. Even with Batman, he's a vigilante and he believes that he's doing the right thing, and people out there in Gotham think that he's some of the police officers, I think he's a good force, but a majority of the people think he's bad and want to stop him. And I think that's a big trope that you see in superhero movies, where everybody's morality is a bit different, and that's something that we see in the real world. Everybody doesn't agree that the same, like, what's good is good and what's bad is bad. I mean, there are big things like killing that we can mostly agree on, but when it comes to very specific instances, like choosing a loved one or choosing the many, that you really bring in morality, and people are going to disagree, and I think that's something that happens a lot when you talk about superheroes. And I love seeing the journey and the emotional toll that it takes on them, whether they decide to keep helping these people even though they don't want the help or think that they're a bad person, or whether they allow that hatred towards them to change them and they become the villain.
And you can play that way. You can play Infamous in that way, where you start the good person and you end up the villain. And it's such an interesting way of telling your own personal story. And I love the games and the opportunity it gives you. And the last game I want to mention very briefly is Spider-Man PS4 by Insomniac. I think that when we were talking about getting the core mechanics of a character and really taking that into gameplay, I think that they do a great job with everything and making Spider-Man feel very much agile and mobile, with the web swinging being the most realistic web swinging we've ever seen, except for Spider-Man Miles Morales, which is the most recent installment by Insomniac. And I love it. I was just playing it literally yesterday. I was playing it, just swinging around the city, because it's so satisfying. It's a satisfying way to play. They solved a bunch of problems where in old Spider-Man games you could swing above the skyline. So like there's no buildings to put a web on above you, but somehow you're still webbing up and swinging. And then they took Spider-Man and they took the core things, the core traits of Spider-Man, and what would make it a good playable game, and what parts of Spider-Man are useful in an interactive format, and they definitely applied those in the perfect way. So
I think another thing, like you were describing, that really makes a superhero film or video game, especially when you're talking about CGI. So that's another thing that can make or break a superhero movie or a video game, is whether the effects that are seen in the film or video game are realistic. I know when it comes to video games, and I haven't played as many video games as you have, but I'm sure if you go back in time to the first couple of superhero games, they are definitely not what they are today and don't have that immersion and really make you feel like you are that superhero, because the game mechanics aren't there. It's the same thing when it comes to films. I think Green Lantern was the one that a lot of people hated, because the just special effects in that film were absolutely horrendous, and that's what broke that film. I'm not saying that's the only thing that broke the film, but that was a big player in that. And I love that Green Lantern is like the butt of all of the jokes now in the superhero realm.
yeah.
Briefly, I'll make this as short as possible. I know I'm always like the last one to talk at the very end, trying to get my last couple of words in there, but I did want to talk about the new Batman movie that's going to be coming out soon. It was scheduled to come out in 2021, but because of the pandemic and everything, it's been pushed back. The release date is March 4th, 2022 now.
Oh, so far away.
I know. It's going to be directed by Matt Reeves.
Yeah.
Do you know about this?
I know about the movie, yes.
Do you know any like specifics? Am I just going to be telling you the same things that you already know?
I know that Robert Pattinson plays the Batman.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, great. So this is supposed to be a new take on Batman, and so this is what I'm talking about when it comes to the DC world and them world building and beginning to compete with Marvel, doing these one shots. So like Taylor mentioned earlier with the Joker, and this is going to be called The Batman, which is any other Batman movie called The Batman?
Nope, not that I know of.
It's very
There's
interesting.
Batman Returns, Batman Begins.
Yeah.
Batman.
I think it's interesting that's The Batman. There's only one.
Well, that's because, in the comics, he's called the Batman.
Yeah.
He is the Batman.
You're right. But this is supposed to be a heavier take on Batman than what we've seen previously. It's supposed to be a noir-style film. And so for those of you who don't know what noir is, it's French for dark film, and it usually features a cynical hero. So that's what we're going to be seeing in Batman. And so I know I was previously talking about how in some of the films that we see today that Batman's not a killer, and he does kill, and that kind of hurts his reputation or hurts the film. I think he can still be a dark character, and I think he can still be a cynical hero without breaking that core value of him, and I think that's something that we're going to have to see with this movie, whether it breaks that or not. But people who have are writing about it and what the producers have given us, very little that they've given us, say that it's definitely going to be a more grim feeling movie, grimy movie. We're going to see more of Gotham City. And another thing, we're going to dive deeper into something that is really heavily focused on in the comics of Batman is his detective skills. So in the comics, he's more of like a private investigator. You know, he's a vigilante, so he's going out by himself finding these criminals. And in the previous movies that we've seen, he finds them in the middle of a crime and beats them up and takes them to jail and all of that. And
I think the movie series that probably does the best with it is the Dark Knight series, but even that is still not as much as what we're hoping to see with the Batman.
Yeah, so the Batman is supposed to really dive into his detective side of it. I think a majority of the film is going to be him tracking down specific people and seeing how he uses his skills, not just with fighting, but uses more of his brain when it comes to fighting crime. And there was a big debate on whether this movie was going to be a sequel almost or an addition to the Joker or to Joker. There was a big debate on whether Joaquin Phoenix was going to be the Joker in this new film. And when I first wanted to talk about this, that was still up for debate, but sadly it is not up for debate anymore, and he has decided to go with a new Joker, which I am not really happy about. But I really would have liked to see them meld this, because I think this is how DC is going to overcome Marvel. One, it needs to focus more on the film itself, like we said earlier, and also I think it needs to be grimier, especially like Joker was very adult, sensitive, touched on really heavy topics, and I think that's what made it great. And so I think if this film does that too, it'll start paving a new way for the DC universe, something that can actually compete with Marvel, because Marvel's really heavily marketed towards kids and teenagers and things like this. And so I think the best way for DC to try and compete with them is to go more adult approach.
Yeah, and I think that there's also the worry of if Joaquin Phoenix returns as the Joker, and these movies don't do as well, or Joaquin Phoenix's performance aren't as good, it could put a taint on Joker.
You're right.
And so, and there's also just sort of the pureness of the Joker appearing in that as a solo film. So that's just my personal take on it. But I think we should move on to some recommendations.
Definitely.
If you're prepared. I'll go first. I'm ready.
I'm not ready. Give me a
You're
minute.
not ready? Isn't that the best when I'm ready and you're not? I'm winning today. I'm the winner.
You are the winner today.
So my recommendation is the Deadpool video game.
Okay.
So it is a perfect video game for Deadpool. It is, I don't think by any means is it an amazing over-the-top video game, but it definitely fits Deadpool's personality. This came out closer to, it didn't come out after Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool existed. This came out before Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool existed. And it came out closer to Ryan Reynolds in the X-Men movie when he played that weird Deadpool that no one likes.
Yeah.
And it does a fantastic job of just being, taking Deadpool's source material and what makes Deadpool, and turning that into an interactive experience and being over the top in the way that only Deadpool can, breaking the fourth wall in the way that only Deadpool can. That's my recommendation for this week would definitely be the Deadpool video game. Rated M for mature, not sold in some countries, so sorry.
Oh, crap. That was heavy. I have watched that multiple times because it is so good, and I love it when films and video games break the fourth wall. I think it's incredible. My recommendation, and this is just off the top of my head, I'm going to go with a TV show. I'm going to go with The Flash TV show.
I don't know.
I am, and I'm going to give a warning. Only watch up to the third season. Don't watch anymore. It's only good up until the third season. After that, it gets really repetitive. But so obviously, it's a retelling of The Flash. Barry Allen, he's a scientist. I want to say physicist, but I don't think that's what he is.
He's a forensic investigator.
Investigator, you're right. So he gets zapped by, what is he?
So there's a particle accelerator, right?
That's what it's called.
And it releases a bunch of energy, most of which ends up on Barry Allen and then gives him the ability to run at superhuman speeds and move at superhuman speeds.
It's really good, and I think it really sticks to the source material, and they bring in the original Barry Allen, because in the comic books, I mean, there's multiple versions of the Flash, obviously, like we were talking about when it comes to Batman. Many comics have retold the story in different ways. So there's the original Barry Allen in the comic books, and so he actually makes an appearance in later seasons and actually teaches this Barry Allen how to come to copes and comes to terms with his powers and how to deal with it and these things. I like the progression of his powers as well, because first it's just superhuman speed, and then eventually you see that not only that he can phase through walls, he can time travel, these other things, and I really like that, because when it comes to superheroes, sometimes you can get in a rut and you can be like, oh, we're seeing the same thing over and over again. I want to see something new. And so I like how they challenge the ideas of what would actually happen if a human could have the ability of superhuman speed.
Yeah.
Only watch up to the 3rd season. After that, like I said, it gets really repetitive, but it's really good. The first 3 seasons, don't get me wrong, I don't want to bash the show. The first 3 seasons are incredible. I love them. Plus, I'm a romantic, and there's a little side story of love going on, obviously, with Iris. What's her last name? Don't know. Iris.
Just Iris. But yeah, no, those are our recommendations for this week. So thank you for joining us on this intellectual journey. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Media for the Intellectually Impoverished is produced by Trey Taylor Smith and Miranda Randy Zabst.
Follow us on Instagram or Twitter at MFTII Podcast, or email us at mftiipodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening.